Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So here I got a fun and random episode for you guys this Friday, because when I did the hardware overview for the PlayStation 1 arcade hardware series, I had so many questions about the Taito G-Net. It seemed to be the most popular board I've shown on the channel, maybe just because it's weird or not many people have heard of it, because compared to a lot of the other PlayStation 1 arcade boards, Capcom ZN-1 and 2, or the Namco 10, 11, or 12 systems, G-Net doesn't really have as much information about it. So you guys asked me to do a one-off episode, so I'm going to show you guys the hardware some more and then talk about the best games you should be playing on the G-Net, because it is a very strange system that basically seems like it is assembled from spare parts. Taito borrowed a Sony motherboard and then just started haphazardly dropping boards on top that aren't even balanced over the core, and it uses a compact flash card versus a standard kind of ROM, which I actually really do love. It's got a really fun look, and a lot of you responded positively to that, seeing these games come on cards. It is a really fun sort of system, and in some ways kind of reminds me of the PC Engine or TurboGrafx system with the Hue cards, except in a more standardized PC form factor. And of course, anything that has Puzzle Bobble on it I have to absolutely love, and this is no different. It is a lot of fun in the hardware side as well, and the library is quite interesting and also quite strange because it's very shmup heavy, but it's got some other genres and a lot of mahjong puzzle games as well. But again, Super Puzzle Bobble, it's always going to be a winner. Now I will say, as far as the hardware is concerned, it's one of the easier Taito boards to handle. Taito F3 is very popular, but the sync on that can be absolutely messy to deal with. Something like the G-Net is a very easy board to deal with. It's pure JAMA, it runs pretty much every game you want, and you can flash the BIOS with a mod BIOS, so you can put your own compact flash cards in a PCMCIA adapter and play them, and it'll also run some other Taito games like G-Darius here that were not released on the G-Net. It does have some conversion capabilities, and it really isn't that hard either, giving it a really deep life, because this has a ton of shmups on it if you enjoy them, but it's also got some other awesome games as well. But it is a very easy modification process as well. Let me know if you want to see a video specifically on that. That you've literally just burned a ROM, pop it in that socket, and it flashes the BIOS for you. But again, it's just such an interesting looking PCB. I love how all these boards hang off the edges. It is not balanced whatsoever. You got that Sony board on the bottom, you have the ROM board, you have the CF cardboard, and then you even have this massive backup board that doesn't use batteries. It just uses supercapacitors that are acting as batteries. It's something that you don't usually see. It's either usually a real-time clock chip with an internal lithium-ion cell, or even a standard battery like on something like, Capcom CPS-2. But it's one of those boards, not many people think about it when they think of arcade boards, but I think it's a really good beginner board to use because it's pure JAMA, everything just works, and the sync rate is super easy to deal with. But of course, what is an arcade board without games? So what I'm going to do in part 2 of this is I'm going to show you my favorite games on the G-Net, the games I think you should play in different genres, and I'm going to kind of rank them from must play to should check out. So let's just move right into part 2 and talk about some games. So right off the top, I want to talk about Chaos Heat because it's my favorite game on the entire Taito G-Net platform, and for me, I think it's one of the reasons that you should own an arcade board if you're into arcade board collecting. And interestingly, this game does have a sequel that was a PlayStation 1 exclusive, and because the G-Net is just an enhanced PlayStation 1, it would have been very possible for them to bring Chaos Heat to home consoles. But at the time of this recording, I'm sure it's never going to change, Chaos Heat is a Taito G-Net exclusive, and it is an absolute ton of fun to play. It's basically Resident Evil meets a run-and-gun game, kind of has some Die-Hard arcade vibes in it in some ways as well as Zombie Revenge. But it's a very simple game to understand. Run around the screen, shoot everything that moves, get a key card, and move on. But I love the graphics, I love the universe the gameplay takes place in. Everything is amazing, these giant cockroaches just running around. This is the type of game that is just pure fun, and it is one of the exclusives on the platform that I think is worth owning an arcade board for. And of course, if you have a second player, the game gets even more fun. But all of the music, all of the sound effects, all of the monsters, the graphics, everything about Chaos Heat just 100% clicks, and I think it's a game that everyone should experience. And it's one of those games that I'm really surprised didn't get ported to home consoles, especially because Taito decided to make a sequel to the game and not release it in the same way that they did Chaos Heat. It doesn't really make too much sense, but honestly, nothing from this era does. But I will say that the soundtrack is amazing, so go ahead and listen for like 30 seconds or so, and I'll come back and show you all the rest of the amazing games that play in the G-Net. But enjoy!
You get far. You get the AC.
Just a super fun soundtrack, but I also love just how this game presents itself with almost this isometric 3D view. You're never quite behind the character's shoulder, so it's not an over-the-shoulder shooter, but it just has a very similar vibe. But all of the bosses, all of the monsters in this game are just absolutely spectacular. In some ways, it reminds me of Beastbuster's Second Nightmare on the Hyper Neo Geo 64, only in that monster design, not in the gameplay. But honestly, this is just one of my favorite games on the G-Net, and it's one that if you're collecting the board, I think you should 100% pick up. Now, it's definitely known for being one of the best games on the G-Net as well, so it's not going to be something you're going to find for $50. But honestly, with that mod BIOS, you can just flash a compact flash card if you so like, but it is worth having in your collection. And just boss battles like this giant green slug just jumping over me, I absolutely love it. And it's got that PlayStation 1 look and feel, but because it is an enhanced spec of the original PlayStation 1, it does look slightly better. And of course, with RGB on an arcade board, you're going to be getting an absolutely amazing signal. So 10 out of 10, I think this is a must play. You got to play Chaos Heat, but let's move on to the next game in the list. And I said if you like shmups, you're going to have an absolute ton of fun on the Taito G-Net, and we're moving right into Savaria. At least that's how I believe it's pronounced. Leave me a comment down below if you know any better, because I've always heard it as Savaria, but it seems like it's written as Sivariar. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. Doesn't affect the gameplay whatsoever, and it is an absolute blast of a Tate shmup by Success. And that's the thing about the G-Net. There are so many good shmups on this platform, ranging from things that you've 100% heard of to deep cuts that you may have never actually seen. And I am going to spread the shmups out in this video, so if you're into those and those alone, you might want to poke around a little bit, but stay around for the rest of the content because there's a ton of fun to be had. But again, it's just another awesome game on the G-Net, and one that is a blast to play. You'll see here by buzzing those bullets, you're going to increase your level, and that is going to be so important in this game. It's huge risk versus reward. You don't want to just avoid the bullets. You want to get as close as humanly possible to them while also avoiding them. As you'll see there, when you do it right, you're going to increase your level and therefore increase your capabilities in the game. And I do love that as an aspect, that pure risk versus reward. We're going to see it on another game in this list as well. Now, I will say that this isn't my favorite looking game. It's just from an art perspective. It's not that the graphics are bad, it's that it just kind of starts out with very basic backgrounds. And I will say these enemy ships do look spectacular, but that ground is kind of just a little bit boring. But as far as the bullet patterns are concerned, outside of taking that death there, and that was my fault, I looked away, it has great patterns, it has great challenge, and it's definitely not one of the quote-unquote hardest shmups on the platform. It's a good place to start to kind of get your bearings into what this genre is asking of you. And I played all of the games on this list on normal difficulty, so it gives you a really good feel of what you would expect when you're playing the game. If you're great at shmups, you're going to love this one. If you're still just learning, I think it's a really good place to start. It's just one of those games that's a blast, but again, because it's a shmup on an arcade board, it's definitely also a game that's not going to come cheap. Most of the G-Net games are not going to be inexpensive outside of stuff like Zoo or Super Puzzle Bobble that I will get to shortly, but I love the graphics on the results screen, and it just has an absolute vibe that I'm there for. And the soundtrack on this one, 10 out of 10, listen for 20 seconds, and I'll be right back. That's exactly the type of soundtrack you would want out of a space shmup, and if you're looking for a new shmup to play or collect on an arcade board, you could do a lot worse than Savaria. I definitely recommend it. Now moving over to a new genre and one of Taito's most famous franchises of all time, we're going to be talking about Super Puzzle Bobble because I absolutely love this entire series. It is one of my favorites, and I know this shares a title with the PlayStation 2 version, but this is a completely different version running on the Taito G-Net, and it is an arcade exclusive, never ported home as far as I know, maybe some weird Korean PC release. That does happen every once in a while. But this is the type of game that you pick up. It's not expensive. You can get cards for this for like $75, and you're going to get an absolute metric crap ton of gameplay out of it. You think you're going to play for 10 minutes, suddenly 2 hours has gone by, you have friends over for a game night, you pop this on, you play for hours having drinks, and you have an absolute blast. And it does add new mechanics to the standard Puzzle Bobble formula as well, moving around the screen, so it kind of feels like a newer, more exciting version of Puzzle Bobble, and I absolutely love that. And so many boards from Taito had a version of Puzzle Bobble on them, but for my money, this is one of my absolute favorites. It plays it straight with the pure 2D aspects that we know and love of Puzzle Bobble, and only uses 3D within the kind of level select in and of itself. So it just has that vibe, and Taito is known for series like this. It's one of the quintessential Hall of Fame first ballot good arcade games you can play in the puzzle genre, and this absolutely does not disappoint. It's one that I can really strongly recommend because it is so inexpensive, because some of the games on this list I'm going to tell you that are must-plays are going to cost you $400 or $500, so it's always nice to have a must-play game that's going to cost you less than like 3 large pizzas hanging out with friends. And it's always great to be able to recommend a game that I think is both a must-play and arcade exclusive and is also cheap, because normally all 3 of those things do not combine. It's either a must-play arcade exclusive and expensive, or it's cheap but ported over to some other piece of hardware that's easier to deal with. And that's why Super Puzzle Bobble definitely gets a 10 out of 10 recommend from me. And obviously just because it is Puzzle Bobble, this is Taito at its best. I think it's one of the best series they ever created. Of course, I love Bubble Bobble, Bubble Symphony, Bubble Memories as well. But I think from a pure gameplay perspective, you can do a lot worse than Puzzle Bobble. It's the type of game that is infinitely replayable, and you'll be probably playing it for the next 5 to 10 years here and there. Now let's go back to the shmups, because I told you there's a lot, and we're going to be talking about Ray Crisis, and talking about the fact that a decent amount of the G-Net games have been ported to home consoles. Now this is definitely a recommend on my list if you want to collect for the G-Net, or if you want to flash CF cards. But if you want to just own the game, go and buy the PlayStation 1 version, because this is like a $500 CF card, it seems like these days. It used to be much cheaper, but it's gotten a lot higher up there, and you can get a Japanese PlayStation 1 version definitely cheaper than you can here, and that is what I would recommend you play. But honestly, as far as the gameplay is concerned, I love this one because it has such a different mechanic. You'll see here that we obviously have our main gun, but then we have this reticle, and we have enemies underneath us that you basically have to tag out and then shoot the rockets out. Kind of feels a little bit like Panzer Dragoon in a way, except as a pure shmup and not kind of an on-rail shooter. And that's what I love about this game. Visually, it's outstanding, it's got a great soundtrack, but it also has a different mechanic to it than most of the other shmups on the G-Net, or even of its time and place. So it gives you that diversity and interesting factor that you're not always getting from the other games. And that's not to say that all the other shmups on the platform are not amazing, because they are, but when you play 2, 3, 4 shmups in a row that all have the same mechanics, you can get tunnel vision. But again, a little soundtrack taste, because the Ray Crisis soundtrack is straight fire. I'll be back in like 30 seconds and I'll show you some more games, but enjoy. It's a super cheery soundtrack, but I just think it works for the game. And the other thing I think works really well are the graphics and use of 3D polygons. I love how you sweep down into this tunnel. It has that kind of pseudo full 3D effect feel to it, where you're not 100% behind the ship the entire time like a normal shmup. It kind of has that mix and match feel. Something like Toby Polystars uses the same thing, and that's always been a really fun aspect of shmups to me, and I 100% love it here. It's just an absolutely amazing game, and I would probably say it's my favorite shmup on the G-Net, and I just love how much the camera pans around and how much drama there really is in the game. Like I said, if you want to own an actual original copy, I would definitely go towards that PlayStation 1 release. It is close enough to Arcade Perfect that you're definitely going to enjoy the money you saved versus buying it on that arcade card, but again, definitely recommend. Now, a very strange game, but one that's actually fun, is Go by RC, or RC de Go if you're playing the Japanese version of it. Most arcade boards have at least one racing game on them, and the G-Net is no different, but it is completely different at the same time, because Go by RC is an RC car racing game where you're not actually in the car or behind the car. You are playing this from the perspective of somebody standing in the stands controlling the RC car. And I will say, for the first minute, that is going to 100% absolutely break your brain. The spatial awareness it takes to understand when to turn does come after that first minute, but you're going to think, how can I possibly play this game, and how can I possibly get better at it and win? Because when you first start the game, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You are not used to playing a racing game like this, it's going to confound you, but once you actually figure out what it's asking of you, it becomes a fun little game. I'm not going to say this is a deep cut hidden gem, it's definitely a B tier effort, but it's one of the games on the G-Net that is different than all of the other shmups on it, because like I said, it was a very shmup and puzzle heavy board, and this is just a game that's not going to last too long, but you are going to enjoy your time with it. It's quirky, it's weird, and if you're playing on an original arcade cabinet, you would have an RC controller basically in your hand in some form or another. Obviously, I'm playing it in a different manner, but it's one of those things. It looks good, it sounds good, and it is intriguing, and it's probably a type of game that you've never really played before. In the 2D era, there were some games that played a little bit from this perspective, but they kind of went away as soon as we got to full 3D. But honestly, it is a fun thing to check out, both from a video game history and preservation standpoint. Being able to play something like this is definitely going to be worth your time. Have your friends over, play around with it. There's going to be a lot of laughs, and the crashes are as fun as the successes. And I will say that this game does get very hard in later levels, so you're going to want to practice the courses, but once you actually get good at drifting and understanding how to turn, I would say it is a lot of fun. Now, moving on to a game that I never hear anybody mention whatsoever, but is one of my favorite games on the platform, is going to be Zoo. Well, technically there's more than one O, so it's Zoo. And outside of that stupid joke, I will say it's a very simple puzzle game that is just extremely charming. You get a board, it's filled with animal heads, and you just need to pivot them around to match 3 in a row. It's a simple match 3 game. But when you get to later levels, once you get your hooks into this game, it becomes addictive. Suddenly when you're playing well, 20 minutes has gone by and you haven't even noticed it. And just like Super Puzzle Bobble, one of my favorite games on the platform, is also one of the cheapest. You can get a card for this for like $50. And I will say the soundtrack is going to get stuck in your ear. It's stuck in mine, so let me make it stuck in yours now. And now I will be humming that all day long, and I assume when you watch it, you're going to be humming it all day long as well. But you'll see there as I drop down some combos, there is a lot of strategy in this game. It looks very simple at face value, but when you actually get in and get to some higher level play, it's an absolute blast. And one, I was letting you guys listen to the audio, well, not really, but you know what I mean. I went and looked up the price on copies of this game, and it's a $50 all-day game. So you can get one of my favorite puzzle games of all time on a really fun and weird Taito arcade board for the cost of like a large pizza and a 6-pack of beer. And honestly, this is going to last you a lot longer than either of those. It's so much fun if you like games like Tetris or other puzzle games, Puyo Puyo, things like that. Pick up Zoo, you're going to absolutely love it. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other puzzle games on the G-Net, and they did get a lot of puzzle games and a lot of Mahjong games. None of the Mahjong is obviously going to show up on this list because I do not play it whatsoever, but Flip Maze is a really unique and interesting game that kind of feels like Tetris meets something like Twinkle Star Sprites, not in the shmup aspect, but in the head-to-head nature of it. Those are just the two games I think of. Comment down below and tell me what it reminds you of. But as we get into the main gameplay here, you're going to see exactly how it works. And this game is so much better with a friend. You just need to flip cards around and spin the icons until you match 3. The bigger your chain, the more of these glass blocks you're going to send to your opponent's board. Once their board fills up, they fall through, you win the match. It is easy on level 1 and becomes exceedingly difficult any level beyond that. But it makes you want to come back and it makes you want to play more and more. You think you're going to play 10 minutes and then all of a sudden you've played an hour. And trust me, with friends this becomes even better. It's one of those games that I never hear anybody mention, and trust me, it's a game that I 100% think you're going to enjoy, and I recommend for the Taito G-Net at like a B+ grade or so. It's just one of those things. It's fun, and that's what I love about the G-Net. Not just for the big experiences like Chaos Heat or something like the shmups. You also get stuff like Flip Maze that's just going to keep you 100% engrossed. It's an intense game, and it is a game made better with friends. And again, it's not one of the more expensive games on the platform, so I definitely think it's something, if you were into this genre, you can pick up. But I love talking about some of the games that no one even knows exist, and I love seeing comments down below saying, I've never heard of this game before the video. So if you knew about Flip Maze, leave me a comment telling me you did, and if you didn't know about it, I want to hear that as well, because I really would be curious. But I said the board was filled with shmup, so we gotta talk about another one, and it is Castle of Shikigami, and it is another absolutely spectacular shmup. But here's where it gets confusing as to what I recommend you should play or collect, because this is an absolute banger of a game. It is a fun tate vertical shmup, but you can also buy this right now on Steam on sale for $9.99. Now trust me, the arcade original version is going to cost you an absolute metric ton more, but it's not just for stuff like Castle of Shikigami. If you want to download and play cave games, you can totally do that. It's not going to be that expensive. If you want an original cave arcade board though, you better bring your wallet, because you're talking mortgage levels of payments, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 all day long. So it's one of those things. If I recommend something and I think it's collectible, that is because you're super into the genre and you want the original. If Castle of Shikigami looks fun and you want to check it out, 100% just buy the Steam version for $10, support the developers, and be done with it. But again, with the mod BIOS, you can kind of do both at the same time, wink wink nudge nudge. And Castle of Shikigami is a very absurd game as well. We just fought a giant angry teddy bear and what looks like a moth and a butterfly combined together with a human doll head. But I love this game because I love the patterns. They're so geometric, they're so interesting, and it has that same risk versus reward mechanic. The closer you get to your opponent's projectiles, the more you're going to be shooting those red projectiles out of your own character, which is going to allow you to defeat them quicker. So it's risk versus reward. How close do you want to get to the bullet and take the risk of dying, and how often do you want to hold back and kind of avoid that and maybe play for 10 more seconds? But again, another great soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds. I'll come back and keep showing you more Taito G-Net games I think you should play. But enjoy! It's another awesome soundtrack on another awesome shmup on another awesome arcade board. The Taito G-Net is just filled with great shmups, and if you are a shmup fan, it is definitely a platform you're going to want to collect for if you do get into arcade collecting. And the best part is, if you do like Castle of Shikigami, just go ahead and look at the rest of the series, because this series does continue. But I am curious, what's your favorite arcade genre, and if you are collecting for the G-Net, what games do you own? Leave me a comment down below, and if you don't collect for it, just leave me a comment and tell me what your favorite arcade games are as far as genre concerned. because I am always curious what the average viewer of this channel enjoys the most. But from the graphics, the mix of 2D to 3D elements, the overall challenge to the series, the soundtrack, Castle of Shikigami is just a banger on a system that is filled with shmup bangers, and that means it's definitely an A tier recommend from me. I also love that the game is a little bit weird. Weird jankiness always ups the score in my perspective. Now another game, Night Raid here, that does have a console port and again is going to be cheaper, would be the recommended way I would play it if you don't already own it. It's still an absolute blast. This game is like 12 minutes from start to finish, but it is some of the most intense 12 minutes in a shmup I have ever played, and it has a very interesting hook as well, because only the bullets are going to hurt you. You can fly through every enemy ship, and it does not matter whatsoever. And it also has the mechanic where you can basically just shoot your ship all around the screen as a special move, and it's going to attack anything on screen. This is like 50% a standard shmup and 50% completely experimental, and just like something like Ray Crisis where it gives you a different mechanic, it's going to freshen up your perspective on shmups while you're playing them, because it's one of those things. If you play Castle of Shikigami too much, you want to play something a little bit fresher, a little bit different, and Night Raid's 100% going to give you that new feel and vibe. But I will say, this game is just dummy hard. In some ways it feels like the hardest shmup on the G-Net to me, and that's because the bullet patterns are both geometric and organic at the same time. You're not just going to be getting patterns that you can understand visually, you're going to have to react a ton in this game because things are just constantly changing and feeling different. And watch these bullets here, they are just absolutely blazing around the screen, and I'm going to get tagged here and there. I can never imagine doing a 1cc of this game, but it makes me want to try. It is so intense, it's so fast paced, it's so wild. This is just ultra hard mode, but I'm playing the PCB on normal difficulty. You can dial it up from what you're seeing, but just visually the game is so unique and so interesting looking, but it also has a really awesome rock style soundtrack that I absolutely want you to hear. So go ahead and listen for like 20 seconds this time, and I'll come back and show you still a few more games to play. But enjoy. Just a super fun soundtrack, and I love what this game does with its 3D perspective. A lot of the ways the same way that Ray Crisis does. I just love that we're falling into this tunnel while all of these 3D polygons rotate around with transparency effect as we fall into the stage. It is an absolute blast. It's 12 minutes of absolute intensity, and it is a shmup I 100% recommend. Now, one other shmup on the platform, it's pronounced 12 Stag, a very weird title. This is probably my least favorite just because of the genre effect, but honestly it might be one that you love the most. I just don't go towards these sort of more military shmups for some reason visually. I love all of the space elements of all the other shmups we've talked about, but it's another great shmup mechanically from Triangle Service, and it is just a ton of fun. But again, unless you're a hardcore arcade collector, it's also been ported to other consoles. This is available on a compilation on PlayStation 2, and while that disc is definitely not going to be cheap from a gaming perspective, it is going to be cheaper than getting an original G-Net card. But again, I recommend the games that I think you guys should play, and I try not to worry so much about the price because everyone decides what is or isn't worth it to them. If there is one thing I will say I don't like about 12 Stag, it's all of these enemies and opponents coming from behind you, and you can end up dead when you don't even realize it. It's one of those things in shmups that I've never 100% loved, and I kind of put that down into the B- category. But again, it's another game that's just an absolute blast mechanically that you should play. And I know that I have not covered every single G-Net game on this video. That was never my intent, because you'd be seeing like 5 different Mahjong games. But if there's a game that I haven't covered so far, leave me a comment down below and tell me why you think I should have, because this is just sort of my, you should play these games if you want to buy a G-Net, and if you don't want to buy a G-Net, you should play them anyway. But I will say 12 Stack does get difficult, and I love this area of effect bomb that doesn't so much bomb out the screen as gives you a halo where you were invincible for a short period of time. It's a fun, different mechanic that definitely feels fresh compared to a lot of the other bombs in other shmups. Now I know this is a G-Net video, but I have mentioned the mod BIOS a few times and its ability to play different PlayStation 1 based arcade hardware from Taito on compact flash cards. And I'm just going to recommend, if you want to buy the hardware, one game and one game only, and that is G-Darius, either version 1 or version 2. Version 1 is the original, it is easier. Version 2 is just hard as nails difficult. It wants your quarters, it's going to take you in the back alley and mug you in the dark and leave you for dead in its difficulty. But it's just such a visually arresting game. The soundtrack is spectacular, the gameplay is intense, it's everything that Taito is known for doing well, and it is, weirdly enough, my favorite game on the G-Net. And I say that because it's not even a G-Net game, but of course PlayStation 1 codebase is so similar that modders can get some of those games that didn't run on G-Net actually booting on them. And it's definitely much cheaper than buying an original arcade board for this, because a version 2 board seems to be hovering around $1,500 to $2,000 right now, depending on how you want to find it. And this has been ported to HD as well, so it's one of those things you can get this on modern consoles. But it started in the arcades, it's where I absolutely love it, and it's one of my favorite horizontal shmups of all time. It is pretty, it is challenging as all hell, I love the colors, I love the soundtrack, I love everything about this game, and it's something you can play on G-Net today, and it is something I can highly recommend. But that's why I left it at the end of the video, because it feels a little bit weird to say my favorite game on a platform is a game from a different platform that was modded to run. But again, just look how intense this is. It's absolutely wild, and if you've never played G-Darius, I can't recommend it enough. But that is my overview of the Taito G-Net hardware, the games I think you should play. Obviously, if you're a big Mahjong fan, there's going to be a lot more for you, but I don't understand the game whatsoever, so it's not appearing on this list. And there are some games that I just didn't really feel like recommending because I don't love them. But leave me a comment down below. Do you want to see more big retrospectives in a single video like this? I'm happy to make them if you guys keep watching. But Taito G-Net, awesome board, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.